Hey guys, it's Mallory here with All About Cats, and in this week's video we're going to be taking a look at a popular New Zealand cat food brand called Ziwi Peak. So the company was founded by Kimberly and Peter Mitchell, and Peter says that the brand is all about selling a little piece of New Zealand's food products and lifestyle to the rest of the world. So the fact that these foods are made in New Zealand from New Zealand ingredients is a really big part of their brand. They source most of their ingredients from the waters, farms, and ranches of New Zealand, and this gives them what they call the New Zealand difference. So New Zealand's ingredients and food products are known as some of the safest and highest quality in the world. And in addition to being known for particularly safe, high-quality ingredients, New Zealand is known as a place to get fresh, free-range ingredients all year round. So Ziwi Peak foods are made from grass-fed, free-range sheep, cattle, and venison. All of their fish ingredients are caught in what they describe as sustainably managed fisheries located off the southern coast of New Zealand. Again, all Ziwi Peak foods are made according to stringent New Zealand standards, so their dry foods are manufactured in a couple of company-owned locations in New Zealand, and then their canned foods are made by a co-packer also located in New Zealand. But the brand isn't just about giving the rest of the world a taste of New Zealand. They're different in a couple of other ways too. Ziwi Peak's dry foods are not made like your typical kibble or other dry foods. They are an air-dried food. So by using a twin-stage dehydration process, Ziwi Peak is able to use a lot more meat in their dry foods than you would see in a typical extruded or even baked kibble. So their dry foods are about 96% fresh meat, organs, bone, and seafood, which is a significantly higher meat content than you're going to see in almost any other dry cat food on the market. Now, the fact that these foods are dehydrated does also mean that they have a very different texture and consistency than a typical dry food. They're also much more calorically dense than a typical dry food. So this is not going to be a quick substitute for a traditional kibble. Although their air-dried foods are probably their signature product, Ziwi Peak also offers a variety of canned foods. Interestingly, these canned foods have somewhat lower meat content than do their dry foods. So these canned foods are 92% muscle meat, organs, and seafood. They contain a combination of tripe and green lip mussel to really boost the nutrition content, but they're also relatively high in plant content due to the inclusion of chickpeas instead of other binders that you would see in other cat foods. But regardless of if you're looking at their dry or their wet foods, all Ziwi Peak products are made without artificial colors, flavors, and preservatives. They're primarily meat-based foods, and they incorporate a variety of organs without resorting to the use of animal byproducts, which is an interesting feature that sets them apart from a lot of other so-called premium brands that eliminate the byproducts, but they're also throwing out the organs along with those byproducts. So Ziwi Peak's approach to cat food seems to be working pretty well in terms of quality control and safety. Since its creation in 2004, the brand has never been involved in a recall, according to my research. So at this point, we've taken a look at the history of Ziwi Peak. We've talked a bit about the brand's unique offering, as well as their sourcing and manufacturing practices and the recall history. So overall, it looks like Ziwi Peak is a pretty good brand that's doing a few things differently from the competition. But again, we're not really going to be able to understand Ziwi Peak until we take a closer look at their foods. So I went out and purchased a variety of Ziwi Peak foods, and I opened them up, and I'm going to be telling you a bit about a couple of their most popular recipes. So first off, let's take a look at their air-dried mackerel and lamb recipe. So as I mentioned earlier, this air-dried food is made primarily from meat. So fresh, wild-caught mackerel, lamb organs, heart, and bone constitute 93% of the recipe. The food also contains green lip mussel, which is a good source of omega-3 fatty acids, including the fatty acid ETA, which is not found in a lot of other food sources. The food is supplemented with chicory, lecithin, dried kelp, and a variety of synthetic vitamins, minerals, and amino acids, which make the food nutritionally complete. So as you can see, this is not your traditional dry food. One, it's extremely low in carbohydrates and is primarily made from meat ingredients, but just visually and in terms of texture, it's very different from a typical dry food. It's a bit like little square pieces of jerky in your cat's bowl. Very different from a typical dry food. The food comes with a little scoop so you can measure it out. Each 2-ounce scoop contains 273 calories, which is more than many cats need in one day. So you're going to want to use this scoop carefully and make sure that you're not going overboard in terms of portion size. So at 57.6% protein, 37.3% fat, and 5.1% carbohydrates, this is a much more species appropriate food in terms of macronutrient distribution than your typical dry food. So this food can be a little bit divisive in terms of palatability. I know that my cats didn't really seem all that interested in it. I fed them Ziwi Peak a few times and they'll eat it a little bit, but it's definitely not their favorite. And I've also seen some reviews from other people saying that their cats weren't so interested in it right away. But if you can get your cat interested in this food and get them to eat it, then it can be a really great option nutritionally. It's overall a really nutrient-dense food that nourishes your cat as the carnivore that they are. The biggest drawback of this food is probably its price. So at $1.34 per ounce, this is one of the most expensive dry foods on the market. Again, it is really calorically dense, so you're going to be able to feed your cat less of it, but it's still adding up to be a bit pricier than a typical dry cat food. Now moving on to one of their more popular canned recipes, I'm going to be taking a closer look at their lamb recipe. So this food is primarily made from lamb ingredients. So it contains lamb muscle meat, it also contains lamb liver, lamb lung, lamb heart, and lamb tripe. So overall, a really broad variety of muscle meat and organs, as well as tripe, which is an ingredient you're not often seeing in a lot of foods. The food also contains lamb bone, as well as, again, New Zealand green lip mussel, which is a source of omega-3 fatty acids. Overall, we're seeing a really nice variety of muscle meat, organs, and bones in a way that emulates your cat's whole prey diet. At the same time, this food also contains chickpeas. Apparently, Ziwi Peak includes chickpeas as an alternative to the guar gum or carrageenan or other gum-based thickeners that you might see in cat food. But the downside of using these chickpeas is that the food's carbohydrate content is bumped up significantly. So overall, on a dry matter basis, the food appears to be about 47.5% protein, 33% fat, and 21.3% carbohydrates. So overall, it does appear to be a little bit on the higher carbohydrate side compared to other wet cat foods. Again, cats can metabolize carbohydrates, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there is some evidence that excessive carbohydrate content could potentially contribute to diabetes, and it isn't really necessary for your cat's well-being. So it's really up to you to decide whether or not you want your cat to be consuming this higher carbohydrate canned cat food. Overall, considering that this food contains such a nice array of muscle meat, organs, and bones, as well as that green lip mussel, it appears to be a really good source of animal-derived nutrition for cats. The downsides of this food are, of course, its cost. So at 54 cents per ounce, this is one of the more expensive canned cat foods that you can buy. And then also it is on the higher carbohydrate side compared to other canned cat foods. So we've taken a look at a couple of the recipes, but how much does Ziwi Peak cost? If you're choosing their dry foods, your price is going to vary depending on which recipe you choose, but it's typically going to be somewhere around $2.50 per day, maybe as low as $2 per day, depending on the size of your cat. And then their wet food is going to be significantly more expensive. So on the low end, you might be spending about $5 a day. If you're choosing a more expensive recipe like their venison food, that price could go up to $8.40 per day. And then with some of their smaller size cans costing even more per ounce, your price could go over $11 per day. So overall, if you're willing to spend the money on these apparently higher quality ingredients and maybe you want a better alternative to traditional dry food, then I would certainly consider Ziwi Peak food. Their canned foods aren't perfect, but they do have some qualities that really set them apart from the competition, which is that they include this nice combination of muscle meats, organs, and bones, as well as that green lip mussel. But again, they might not be worth it for everyone, considering that a lot of other wet foods do offer really good concentrations of animal-derived ingredients and are not nearly as expensive as Ziwi Peak. So overall, according to the All About Cats standard, I would give them an 8 out of 10 in terms of species appropriateness, a 10 out of 10 in terms of ingredient quality, an 8 out of 10 on product variety, and a 4 out of 10 in terms of price. When it comes to customer experience, I'm going to give them a 9 out of 10. A lot of people really like Ziwi Peak food, and this company seems to have really earned the respect of its customers. And then in terms of recall history, considering that the brand has been around for almost 20 years and has never been involved in a recall, I'm going to give them a 10 out of 10 score. So overall, that is a 48 out of 60 rating, or an A- grade. If you're interested in purchasing Ziwi Peak food, you can find it in a wide variety of pet specialty retailers, so you can head over to their site and look at their where to buy tool in order to find it locally. And you can also purchase it through Chewy. There will be links to the products mentioned here in the description. So if you found this video helpful, please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps us a lot. And if you're interested in supporting more cat food brand reviews and information on all things cats on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss an upload. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!